Hello, hello, Jordan Chariton live. Steve Grumbine, Grumpy Tuesdays. It's been a while, and you were on a much-deserved vacation, even though it was raining the whole time. And now we're back to cry and complain about the United Corporations of America, the mass inequities, the mass injustice, the tale of two cities, the three criminal justice systems, and I'm going to go off within this hour a few times. I hope you'll join me because I've had enough, Steve. I've had enough, particularly with these Wall Street criminals who have purchased our government and just as a write-off, continue to bilk millions of people in the United Corporations of America as they enjoy sailing in Nantucket and escaping criminal penalties. So we'll get into the latest with Bank of America, who is trying out their best Wells Fargo impersonation. We'll also bring out some old-time favorites, Goldman Sachs, and some others. For those of you who don't know, Bank of America got hit with a $250 million fine. No criminal penalty, of course. Pennies to Bank of America, doesn't matter to them. Then we'll get into the Bidenomics. I don't know if you heard about this, Steve. Biden, the Democrats are on a tour pushing Bidenomics, but there's some new economic markers out there that might tell a different story about how dandy the economy is. I think there will be time. We'll get into what might be the motherlode. I've been talking about it, the UPS strike, which could happen in 2 weeks now. As over 300,000 workers might go on strike. 97% of the Teamsters have voted to authorize a strike. There's been some kind of hot and cold periods in the last 2 years. We had Striketober, where it seemed like every other day there was a new strike among workers. Of course, the union efforts of Amazon, Starbucks, other workers, and then, corporate America and the Supreme Court started responding to those union efforts. But from everything I could tell, it does seem like there might be a massive strike among UPS workers. And I want to talk to you about that because it could really have a major ripple effect, because it definitely will affect the economy. And I think some people need to be made uncomfortable and, have some be inconvenienced. But before we get there, smash that like button, share the live stream. The more people that press like, the more people that will see. We're almost at 144,000 subscribers. So if by dumb luck you have not subscribed, subscribe. For a while, we were crawling in subscribers, but sometimes YouTube accidentally pulls their, finger off the button. So hopefully we can get to 144,000 and then start hopefully getting closer to 150,000. But let's start. Obviously, nobody was held accountable, Steve, for destroying the global economy not so long ago, 12 years ago, with the 2008 financial crash. Obama allowed millions of people to be foreclosed on. I would put Bank of America, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, AIG. I'm probably forgetting some in there with kind of playing, blackjack at all of our expense. And then the double whammy of, COVID. A lot of people have never recovered from any of this. And now, since there was only Band-Aids, really, pretend reform put forward, Dodd-Frank, which was really nothing that banks took that seriously. Banks knew that they could continue just fraudulent behavior that in other countries you might see criminal penalties. The latest is Bank of America. It's from USA Today. Bank of America forced to pay $250 million in fines, customer refunds over junk fees and fake accounts. Bank of America has been ordered to pay $250 million in fines and customer compensation for deceptive practices that named hundreds of thousands of consumers, according to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the one Republicans wanted to disband. The federal regulator on Tuesday said the bank withheld credit card rewards, illegally double dipped on fees, and opened accounts without consent. It's one of the highest financial penalties in years against the country's second largest bank, which was also ordered to pay a $10 million civil penalty over unlawful garnishments and $225 million in fines for botched state unemployment benefit disbursements in 2022. The latest penalty includes $90 million to the CFPB and $60 million to the Office of the Comptroller. The bank also must pay $80.4 million in consumer redress on top of the $23 million it had already paid to customers denied reward bonuses. This was the worst of it, the double dipping to harvest junk fees. Part of the penalties stem from a now defunct Bank of America policy that charged customers $35 when the bank declined a transaction because a customer did not have enough funds in their account, also called a non-sufficient funds fee. The CFPB found the bank allowed fees to be repeatedly charged for the same transaction, allowing the banks to generate substantial additional revenue. Bank of America eliminated all non-sufficient fund fees and reduced overdraft fees from $35 to $10 in the first half of 2022. As a result, revenue from these fees has dropped more than 90%, the bank said to USA Today. Oh, how nice. Fake accounts. Bank of America withheld credit card rewards to tens of thousands of consumers who submitted applications in person or over the phone instead of online. The regulator said the bank also had employees that, since at least 2012, illegally applied for and enrolled consumers in credit card accounts without their knowledge to reach now disbanded sales-based incentive goals. I mean, I could go on, but basically they were double dipping. They were opening fake accounts, very similar to what Wells Fargo was doing. They got a slap on the wrist. The intent often with these headlines, either from the Department of Justice or the media, is to make it look really punishing. And, oh my God, look how much they're going to have to pay. And this is, record fines and all this shit. Well, I would venture to guess, since they keep doing it, they're making more out of the fraud than they're having to pay back ultimately. So it's just baked into the cake, like it's baked into the cake for the fossil fuel companies when they have to pay record fines. Name your corporate villain. But there's real people. You say austerity kills. There's real people who are harmed by this or could die from these practices because they don't have any money and they're going deeper in the hole. And when you don't have any money and you got kids and inflation and you're facing homelessness, something's going to break. I don't really know what more to say. Obviously, there's a reason there's no criminal penalties. But one thing that really stood out to me, it's not the same thing. But remember, part of the investigation into Trump for January 6th, people don't realize, is his email practices. His campaign was sending emails out to his fans. And the fine print at the bottom is if you donate to whatever it was, Stop the Steal or Save America, in very small print, if you donate this one time, you're going to be automatically charged in a month, or you're going to be charged 2 or 3 times until you stop. And people didn't realize that. That's part of a criminal investigation for fraud. So why is it that Trump, who I'm not defending, but that could be part of the criminal investigation into him, but some of the biggest banks in the world, it's always civil. There's no criminal penalty. I think I know the answer. Would love your thoughts.
Well, first of all, you've got to realize that we don't live in a democracy. We don't live in even really a republic. We live in an oligopoly. We live in a country controlled by the wealthy elite. It goes back to the founding fathers. Everybody always talks about the founding documents like there's some sacred thing. These guys are the same guys that said that blacks are 3/5 of a human being. These are the same guys that never thought it possible, which is why affirmative action's being repealed, because blacks were never intended to go to Harvard based on the founding documents. This is why a parliamentarian was able to stop progressive legislation. This is why it always happens. And if you go back to the financial crash in 08, 09, etc., we saw elite control fraud on display with the housing and the mortgage industry. the exact same recipe for fraud, which Professor Bill Black frequently talks about. A guy that brought down the Keating Five talked about it. There's a recipe. Bottom line is you have lots of transactions, you have perverse incentives, and you ultimately have the ownership of the banks, ownership of these arrangements, and ultimately you give those people enough incentive to do fraud, and they will do it. Well, the problem is that these banks are too big to fail. They don't want them to fail. They want them to stay in business, and so they're not going to do anything. And money is nothing to them because they got lots of it. So in the end, this will continue in perpetuity because it's intended to go on in perpetuity. And the idea that they're there to serve us is just preposterous. It's ridiculous. At this point, there shouldn't be any question. You shouldn't even be wondering why at this point. They are literally there simply to make their lives better at the expense of everyone else. And it literally goes back to the founding of this nation as far as the colonial version of this nation goes. So, I mean, there's really not much more to say than that. This is control fraud. Fraud has been going on. I mean, go all the way back to the crash in the 1920s. I mean, they have shown time and again how Wall Street, how banking has been literally at the center of just about every single crisis the country has faced. And if you consider it it's a crisis for us little people, but it's not a crisis for them. They're making money hand over fist. And by the time somebody realizes what they've done, they've already pocketed way more than they would have ever made otherwise. So even those fines are a joke. They didn't cover what they made. They didn't cover the ill-gotten gains from the stuff that they did. It's ridiculous. So it's going to continue.
We should also point out, it's not a surprise to any of the viewers, but part of what perpetuates this, I can't tell you how many political morning breakfast panels I've seen sponsored by Bank of America, how many newsletters in the media I've seen sponsored by JP Morgan Chase, Amazon, et cetera, et cetera. So they'll do the headline, they'll cover the story, and then move on. They're not going to do a deep dive on those harmed. They're not going into these communities to talk to people who, back then might have lost their homes, or in this case, might have, had to ration things because they went so far into debt with these repeated $35 charges. The media is brought to you by the criminals. I mean, I don't know what other way to say it. Not only is the media brought to you by the criminals, Colin, if you have that clip, literally the media, I mean, everybody gets on MSNBC for rehabilitating these Iraq neocons. Bill Kristol lives in the green room at MSNBC. Nicole Wallace has a show. It's MSNBC is littered with Bush Republicans. But the media has brought out all of these Wall Street executives that I would dare to say in European countries might actually face some criminal penalty. Let's look at CNN. I think this was a few months ago, gracing us with the CEO of Goldman Sachs on a baseball field, to slobbering all over the CEO of Goldman Sachs, telling us why the real problem is we spent too much money from the government during COVID.
Was it too much stimulus coupled with those other things? I mean, Lloyd Blankfein, your predecessor, said a few weeks ago, we have too much growth, too much stimulus.
I think it's very easy with hindsight to say if you were going to go back and rewrite the play,
you'd write it differently?
You'd write it differently.
What's an important lesson, right?
Well, of course it's an important lesson, but it's also, we were going through a very difficult period, an unknown period during the pandemic, and there were people that needed help. There were people that needed support. Unfortunately, we're not really great at directing in a very specific way to people that need help. We wind up kind of directing it very broadly.
You would have gone smaller, done it differently.
I would have gone smaller and tried, to be very directed to the people that need help and not necessarily get it so deeply embedded throughout the economy. There's some that might disagree with that, but I think in hindsight, when you think about the size of the numbers, the amount of money that went out through 2 administrations, by the way, it's quite significant, and it's had an effect.
It's an important lesson, right? Says the journalist.
A little bit.
Oh God, it's just, and in fairness, he wasn't the CEO. That was Lloyd Blankfein during the financial crash, but it's all the same ilk. So we just continue to bring out society's worst villains that are just victimizing everybody, and the media normalizes it, brings them out. To me, I don't want to be dramatic. You would have a problem. I mean, obviously, he was in prison. You would kind of have a problem with bringing, Timothy McVeigh on the screen to lecture us about the rise of white nationalism and racism. But let's bring out the Wall Street executives who tanked the global economy, which leads to people to die.
Yep.
People thrown out of their house. Not to mention J.P. Morgan, who, by the way, was complicit in Bernie Madoff's fraud. That's Bernie Madoff. His main account was with J.P. Morgan.
Yep.
Were they the dumbest motherfuckers on earth? Like they didn't know what was going on? Not to mention all the other fraud J.P. Morgan has been involved with. Actually, I have the story. This is how is corrupt criminals like Jamie Dimon not in prison for fraud? This is not even CNN. This is just an independent journalist doing this. Violation tracker, parent company, 10 primary offenses, local securities abuses, 13 million. Oh, excuse me, 13 billion. Mortgage abuses, that's 5 billion. Banking violations, 4 billion. Anti-money laundering deficiencies, 2 billion. False Claims Act, 614 million. Foreign exchange market manipulation, 550 billion. I mean, I could go down the list. Not only was there was never any criminal penalty involved with that, but for a while, the media and it was kind of pumping up this Jamie Dimon for president. You remember that? This year, Wall Street boosts Jamie Dimon presidential run. The chief executive hinted at a potential presidential run on Wednesday, telling Bloomberg, maybe one day I'll serve my country in one capacity or another. It's just unbelievable. And this is why, in one way, I guess my first on the ground, anything, not reporting, but just my first on the ground political event was Occupy Wall Street. That's the first time I ever went to anything. I mean, I kind of paid attention to the 2004 election, to the 2008 election, but I wasn't really politically active. I went down to Zuccotti Park, and it spoke to me, and I saw the rage. Unfortunately, I don't think I like the concept of this, hippy dippy, no central leadership. It needed some central leadership, but it was quite the accomplishment back then. And then, Michael Bloomberg descended his police to crush skulls and break it up. But the root of that, which wasn't so long ago, should still exist today. I really wish we had another Occupy Wall Street type thing that actually encompassed what we've talked about over and over, which is an economic boycott, because this is just getting out of hand. It's not going to stop. With AI now, who the hell knows what kind of fuckery these banks could do to working people and innocent people who won't know any better, that they're being charged repeatedly over whether it's overdraft fees or fake accounts or whatever. And yeah, occasionally you'll hear Elizabeth Warren speak out for tighter Wall Street regulation. But this is bigger than regulation. You really can't regulate your way out of systemic rot like this. To me, it needs to be nationalized, the banking system.
You get no fight out of me. You get no fight out of me at all. I mean, this deregulation has been going on for a long, long time. I mean, going back to, well, I guess you can always kind of zero back into that 1972 era when it really kicked into overdrive, the Nixon era and into the Ford and the Carter era. It really, really picked up then. The idea that we can somehow or another regulate our way back is, I think, a bit naive, even though I'm all for full regulation, blowing it up, nationalizing the banks. It fundamentally misses the point of who and what is in power in this country. And when I say in power, I'm not just talking about elected officials. I'm talking about the apparatus that keeps things the way they are, period, full stop. I mean, you brought up Madoff a minute ago. I want to speak to that for a second. Madoff was a piker, a small timer compared to the other fraudsters that got away with murder, that got nothing happened to them at all, and nothing will happen to them. They will make an example to give the people a bone, to make them still believe that everything is still going. But the fact is that since the great crash in the 20s, you have seen no real prosecution of white collar crime. You've seen no real attack on these fraudsters. And there's a reason for that, because they're part of the quote unquote good guys system. The people that are above us, the people that are well-to-do, the people that live life la vida loco 24/7. Us little people are not in their radar. We are not a concern to them. The only concern they have with us is whether or not we'll revolt, whether or not we'll become disgruntled and take to the streets, like you were saying, with Occupy Wall Street, as a direct result of us not being willing to do that. And I talked about this on the other day on my show. Since the 60s, back in the 60s with Timothy Leary and the LSD and the acid tests and everything else, people's minds were expanding. Yes, there was a counterculture, but people were willing to see beyond just this very narrow wall of must vote, must do this, must do that. They had a much broader idea of what it meant to attack the system, to fight the system. We've kind of, even people that think they're really radical are pathetically normies. And we find that most people can't see beyond that. So the idea of an Occupy Wall Street happening, you've got too many police state, too many things to keep order. These folks learn from each thing that we do. The police state is real. It's there. It's been there from You can go back to the coal miner fights back in the 1900s. Had a great police abolition activist come on not too long ago named David Correa, and he spoke specifically about the role of police to keep people down, to keep capital moving, to keep the flows going, and to make sure that nobody gets in the way of people making money. And there's no way that we're going to be able to do that again the same way we did it last time. There's going to have to be something different, because they've read that script. They've got protocols and tactics to block it. And as you've seen, back just even in the Bernie movement, when we were able to organize and get large swaths of people out to places, they've even choked the algorithms off to prevent us from having that kind of ground swell. So you think about the way that media has been controlled, the narrative has been controlled. The idea that we can fight back through the normal methods, through the normal avenues that we frequently fall back to, I think is just very naive. It's necessary, though. That's the thing. It's incredibly necessary that we educate each other, that we divorce ourselves of the normie thinking that keeps us in the hamster wheel doing the same shit over and over again, expecting different results. And until we do that, an economic boycott will last 10 minutes before people get bored and move on to the next subject. You said something else that was really important. These subjects pop up in the news. Well, he said a lot of things that are important, but this particular things pop up in the news and everybody's hot and bothered for about 18 seconds. And then they're off to the next subject. And this is the problem I have with almost all alt media out there that just sort of bounces around and can't stay on task. Because of that, their brains are conditioned to just ADHD generation, if you will. I don't really like that, but you get my point. We have been so tick-tocked into not being able to focus on the big problem. And if you get down to it and you keep narrowing it down and you keep realizing, this is a long-winded explanation, but I hope folks will stick with me on this. This was a big eye-opener for me. I was trying to understand why we don't do more of this stuff in this country. And between speaking with Michael Hudson the other day and reading Friedrich Engels, it comes to bear that Europe has very, very real roots to feudalism. They remember what it was like to break free of feudalism. So these folks are ready to take to the street. They're ready to fight back against the king. They're ready to do those things because that's part of their national cultures. But over here in the US, we started as a bourgeois revolution to begin with. We're just a bunch of rich people that didn't want to pay any taxes to the crown. It wasn't, even when we had revolutions, it wasn't for regular people. We keep celebrating a rich people revolution. July 4th isn't about you and I being free of England. Heck, I'd like to be a part of England half the time compared to what we are in the States. So the idea that we are somehow or another fighting a good fight and all this stuff, we've got to really deprogram our brains and just pull back from the day-to-day shit show that they keep us on the hamster wheel to keep us from ever focusing on the fact that all of these things are really, truly by design. And it's really hard to swallow sometimes if you just think that you're going to vote your way out of this. And this is where an Occupy-like movement really needs to kick into gear. I've tried to explain to people, we cannot organize within the political system. The political system itself is part of the system. It was devised by those very people. John Adams didn't want people to be able to vote their way through. It was to prevent the tyranny of the masses. It was literally to prevent democracy. They created some bastardized fake democracy, and we're still going through that friggin' road exercise thinking we're going to get different results. So I think you're spot on. I think we need to be in the street with knowledge, though, and understanding, and work together outside that political system. Otherwise, the very thing you talked about, which is exactly what we need to do, it is never going to happen. I mean, think about how cucked AOC is from the time she stood on Pelosi's desk with the Sunrise Movement at her feet to now. They don't even look the same. They don't even act the same. They're not the same. And so you ask yourself, well, what the hell happened? And it's easy to focus on one person. It's easy to focus on the sellouts, and they might be sellouts, but the system itself is designed to bury them back through and roll them back in and consume them. So we keep looking to them for solutions, but they can't help us. We are who we're looking for, and we've got to be smart, and we've got to work on things outside of that system, or it won't fix. It will never get fixed.
Two things in response to that. First off, I saw a few people in the comments say Madoff ripped off rich people. That's why they went after him. Yes and no. Yes and no. There's a lot of people, working people, that had their pensions tied up in like just innocent, average working people down in Florida and other places that, you know, were public workers or whatever, and their banks or whoever their pensions were with got invested with Madoff off of name recognition, and their retirements went to shit. So he did fuck rich people, but he also fucked a lot of working people, just like these banks are fucking mostly working people. Secondly, I don't think Tina would care, but I thought of something which I think is why we're continually nothing changes. Tina and I were talking earlier through text because she just went down to Cop City, her second trip. And the first trip she took, there was cars on fire and protests, and our views were much, much higher than the second trip. I would argue the second trip was more substantive. She had better interviews, more in depth, not because she didn't do well the first trip, but it just, some trips are more action packed, and there's protests and shit on fire and shit blowing up, and the views are really great. At the second trip, you're covering the same thing, way more in depth. You're interviewing the mother of an environmental protester who was assassinated by police. You're lucky if you're getting 200 live viewers. And she said, she asked, why do you think Cop City dropped off as far as interest? And I said, without clashes, cars on fire, thousands protesting or encamping, interest wears off. Same thing happened in East Palestine, where originally when, you got the plume and we're there pretty much, a week or so after, we're getting thousands of live viewers. But when you stay on a story that's important because it's the right thing to do, interest drops off. I'm not necessarily blaming the American viewer or blaming consumers. I just think it's part of this mass distraction society we have, because people are worked so close to the bone, and because people are so exhausted, whether you're a mother of three or a father of three, a single mother, you have no kids, you're still a workaholic. People are just in a capitalist system that does not really put a lot of stock on personal growth, time off, enjoying life, time with your family, time with your newborn, on a system that just focuses on work. I think that kind of trains people not to gravitate towards the substantive, if that makes sense, to look for the escape, to look for the new shiny thing or things exploding or, things like that, rather than to stay on something, to not our viewers would be the exception, because our viewers really appreciate that we stay on certain stories long after they're new and explosive and this and that. But at the end of the day, I think and these algorithms, like you said, really worsen that, because it's not necessarily just that people gravitate on their own more to the new or explosive or fiery protests or things like that. That's what's delivered through algorithms to them. It's not, a substantive interview with a Black Lives Matter activist down at Cop City. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think part of the systemic rot is a lot of things that should not be normalized, like our banks defrauding people, like mass shootings killing 20 children, like 4 days in a row were the hottest on record last week, barely covered. All these things are normalized, and that's why people keep moving on.
I know that it's cliche to talk about.
And by the way, speaking of substance, super chats are welcome, folks. We could use it. Go on.
I know it's cliche to talk about the Matrix. I know the Matrix is like a meme waiting to happen 24/7.
I guess I'm the only one that never saw it, but go ahead.
You need to see the Matrix. You really do. Okay. But that said, there's one scene that everybody I'm sure of that has seen it is aware of. And that is when Cypher is sitting there cutting the steak and he takes a bite and he's like, he goes, I know this isn't steak, but damn, it's good. And just goes ahead and eats it because he got reinserted in the Matrix, dropping a dime on the others. Okay. The reality is that when you try and tell someone you're not voting your way out of this, people's brains blow up because that means they have to do something different than what they think that they've always done. And it's scary, right? It is scary once you start thinking about the enormity of what we're up against. The wash, rinse, repeat of every single thing that we go through. The stupid things that we do, checking cabinets in our kitchen just to see what's in there. And then we walk to the next cabinet, open up like an OCD person, knowing full well we hadn't gone to the store, knowing full well every single thing that's on every single shelf, just rote behaviors that we do that make up our lives. And when you understand that the very thing that we have to do is going to be more than what you're used to doing, more than what you're willing to accept, it's going to bust your brain because you can't just vote for Bernie or vote for whoever and get what you need. If you think about how painful it is when you realize your girlfriend cheated on you, or you realize that, hey, I thought this investment was going to be great and it tanked or whatever. Those are painful, but they aren't any big deal compared to what we're really experiencing as we recognize we are living in kind of a Truman Show of sorts, and they know it, and they can go up there and they can do the dance in front of the camera to sell you whatever vision they need to keep you in line. And it really kind of came to like a point of exploding in my brain when I started realizing what the role of policing was. I think that abolition is so key here because we are so used to living in this narrow order. And if you think about it, versus pets, where we love our pets and we snuggle our pets and we take them out, we do whatever, versus a herd animal that just walks through the line to get the hole punched in their head as they become the next steak. Okay. The difference is nothing other than perception. They're both animals. They both could be domesticated. They both could be, loved or whatever, but one is treated specifically as your personal friend, your family, whatever. And the other one doesn't even have a face. It's just a commodity. Well, you got to transfer that thinking to the pets or the rich people. They treat each other like whatever. And then we are nothing more than herd animals being led to wherever they want us to go to, whatever narrative they want us to go to. And once you try to really resist that narrative and you fight and you push back and you say, no, that's not right. MMT, for example, you say, no, it's not right. Let me tell you, the herd is just so, oh my God, I can't handle information different than what I thought because it's just, there's too many connecting issues that I've got to process in my brain to be able to absorb what you just said. And so they go back to it. And this is the Cypher reference from the Matrix, all wrapped up in one. And it's very, very hard. And when you realize that, when you see it, when you fully grasp that, and you recognize why people You tell them something 1 minute, and the next minute they're right back to doing what they were doing 5 minutes before, even though they know the truth is different than that. Like so many people I've talked to MMT will go back immediately 5 minutes later, talking about taxpayer dollars, talking about the national debt's a big problem. Oh my God. And they'll go right back to it because their brains are conditioned. And we have had it fucked to us over and over again, from churches to TV promotions to newspapers to everybody you talk to at church, at school, at work. It's the same shit being crushed into your skull, and pulling out of that takes an act that is heroic. It's truly heroic to be able to go through the kind of pain and torture it takes to see reality for what it is. And I think that is why you see that we can't make the kind of progress we need, because the truth is just too much to bear for the average person. And you're left with a few freaks on the corner with the John 3:16 sign saying the end is nigh, and everybody's like, shut up, crook. And they keep on walking. And I think this is part of the problem here, is that we all want to be normal. We all want to be like we're in the know. We all want to feel like we're in the right place, doing the right things in the right way. And the idea that we're being led is it's horrible realization to feel that, to absorb that. And I think that until we can break free and get a media that is clear of that kind of stuff, that is thought-provoking and really, really taking the time to tear that freaking veneer of bullshit off, we're going to never be able to break free from that. And that's scary. That's terrifying, actually, but it's true. So
as a non-Matrix watcher, I will put it on my list to watch that. I don't really know what this means, but Ariana says Grumbine is jank if he escaped the Matrix. So take that for what it's worth.
Am I that fat? No, I'm joking.
And keep those super chats coming. We'll read them in a bit. It's a good segue to, yes, a political electoral story, I think. Listen, I'm getting 2015-16 vibes here. You remember Obama was on his last legs politically. Him, the Democratic Party, the media were crowing about how wonderful the economy was. Everything was kind of back after, at that point, the financial crash. We heard GDP was good, and, unemployment was low, and all the traditional markers were just dandy. But people didn't feel it because there was bullshit. Well, I'm thinking the same thing here. And it's not just Biden's fault. It's the whole system's fault, because this economic fairy tale of a strong economy is pixie dust fed to us by Democratic presidents, Republican presidents alike. I have a couple things here. This is a tweet from Lauren from the Washington Post. She does labor reporting. Another reason the labor market is not looking so hot for workers: employers, from nonprofits to restaurants, are slashing hours. People working part-time for reasons beyond control rose by nearly 500,000 last month. Businesses, this is the story, businesses are cutting workers' hours in a warning sign for the economy. The number of people working part-time for reasons beyond their control rose by 452,000 last month, biggest jump in more than 3 years. Businesses are starting to cut workers' hours, forcing hundreds of thousands of people into part-time roles in what could be an early warning sign for the economy. The number of people who work part-time but want to work full-time rose by 452,000 in June, and all 4.2 million were employed part-time for economic reasons beyond their control, a 12% increase from the month before. I think that number is a little distorted because they're saying part-time, but I don't think that includes full-time freelance, permalance, as they call it, the gig workers. So I would say it's way more than 4.2 million if you're combining part-time workers, freelance workers, permalance, project-based, seasonal workers, all of the fucking clusterfuck in this new Gilded Age. Then you look at other metrics. This from Market Watch. Many more people are working multiple jobs as Americans battle inflation and layoff anxiety. Multiple job holders reached 8,137,000 in March, or 5% of the total employed population, according to the latest data. That's up from close to 7.5 million during the same period last year. We heard that yesterday when we showed clips of John Farina's coverage of a practice UPS picket where several of the workers said we're working all day at UPS and then going to our second job. And I don't have this article, but I referenced it yesterday. Disability claims are way up too, way up compared to last year. I can't say definitively, but I would argue part of that is due to COVID and long-term symptoms that the media has pretended doesn't exist anymore. So you have all of this. Obviously, the usual. I mean, we've shown the charts over and over again. You know, the booming economy featuring, where is that damn chart that I love to show? U.S. Income inequality compared to other countries over the last 40 years. Unionization falls to record lows. Obviously, the productivity versus wage growth. So this is what we're getting in fundraising emails now for the Democratic Party. Bidenomics, low great growth, high GDP, low unemployment, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of similar to what we got from Obama in 2015, 2016. Hillary kind of ran on that, even though she didn't have an economic message. But it seems to me this is the ingredients for phony populists. DeSantis is not succeeding, but Trump, to simply say, I was president, no inflation. I was president, no inflation. Bring me back. I was president, strong jobs. And most voters, even though he's obviously, multiple indictments and everything else, a lot of voters might buy it, including independents.
Well, you're probably right. I mean, it's not going to change a lot because what's going to happen is going to happen. That's unfortunate. But here's the thing that's important to understand about the economy right now. It was maybe a year ago that they started the interest rate hikes. Year plus,
year and a half,
2
years. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so within that space, that any economic actions you take have to take time to go. They're like leading indicators, lagging indicators in the economy. By raising interest rates and continue to raise interest rates, what they've done, and you'll notice they're talking about the strong economy. Why? Because the interest income channel is soaring. The rich are getting huge monies from their stock, from their bonds, from their other investments that have interest rate through the roof. They're making big bucks while simultaneously Jane and Joe Sixpack are out there running up their credit card at 35% and are trying to buy the same thing that they could have bought if they had cash. They're having to put it on that credit card at 35%. And then they're paying compounding interest on that same thing as well. Now, when you have people working part-time jobs and putting together 3 or 4 jobs to make one, I mean, that's really tough. It's no wonder there's disability claims. It's no wonder people are tired and freaking doing brain dead things, bumping into walls, falling down, slipping and sliding. Plus all the deregulation and everything has made work a real bastardized place to be. But I want it to be like crystal clear. Joe Biden has ran on the idea that he reduced the deficit. I want you to think about what I'm saying here. He reduced the deficit 1.7 trillion, historic deficit reduction. Okay. Now, deficit reduction, I've said this on the show. It's been a few months since I've actually gone through this, but quickly, those interest rates are bringing new money into the economy straight to the wealthy. It's not coming down to Main Street. It's straight to the wealthy. Okay. While simultaneously down at the bottom, we're getting nothing and liking it. We're being told no student debt relief. We're being told no Medicare for all. We're being told no Green New Deal. We're being told no job guarantee. And sorry, with all due respect, no, I'm not even flirting with that basic income shit. So the idea here is that beyond that, there is no improvement for the working class whatsoever. Okay. And the economy is crashing down on us. But on paper, because new money is still being pumped in to the interest income channel for the rich, it's flourishing for some, which is very Reagan-like. This is a very Reagan-style economy because Biden is very much a Reagan Republican, a Reagan Democrat. And a lot of people voted for Ronald Reagan. You got to be proud of yourselves voting for Ronald Reagan. I mean, Ronald Reagan's a good guy, right? But this is what you get with Ronald Reagan. The problem is the right wing has gone further. They're like, right wing, we don't need no stinking Reagan. We got ourselves a Trump. Okay. Now, one thing's for sure, because we think inherently that they spent money during the pandemic. So therefore, all that printing money created inflation. But that's not what it did at all. What happened, quite frankly, was just like a pitcher and a catcher signaling to each other, putting the 2-finger for a curve ball or banging the trash can if you're the Astros to let them know what pitch is coming through. The Fed has been signaling to industry, hey, we're going to raise rates. Biden's been selling to everybody, hey, we're going to cut the deficit. All of these things are playing together. These are all like signals to industry to raise rates, to raise prices, to do things like what they've been doing, price gouging. Great economists like Isabella Weber have been out there speaking eloquently, lots, big time, about the greedflation, about profit maximization is what they're calling it. And they know that point blank, if people have any extra money at all, somebody's got to soak that money up. It's got nothing to do with inflation. Money created, it creates inflation. That's bullshit in the chef's salad. What's happened is that these industries, and you saw it, 1,000% profit growth out of nowhere. What the fuck? Where did that come from, right? And what they're doing is it's greedflation. They're literally jacking prices up in these smoky. People in general are being fucked hardcore. And the reality is that's the way the system's intended. We keep thinking that they're just dumb and bumbleheaded and they're just not doing the right things. Oh my God, how could they be so stupid? Stupid for who? They're doing great for the rich. They're doing shit for us. But we are so convinced that they're there to serve us. And they're just, and if it wasn't the Republican, if it wasn't the, the parliamentarian, gosh, if it wasn't for President Manchin, we would have these great things. But alas, it's a rotating villain. It's a constant thing. And the reality is the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and the layoffs are a lagging indicator from the rate hikes. They told them, people, we need to lay off 10 million people. Remember Larry Summers? We need at least 10 million people laid off. These are
another
all
fucking criminal that's
planning,
on TV.
Planning it and planning it and planning it and planning it and planning it, right? Planning it. They've known. And so now that perfect storm of deficit reduction and interest rate hikes and the signaling to industry is telling industry, you got to start laying off people, because when labor has any strength at all, they've known this forever. We cannot give an equitable share to labor, because if we do, they may ask for more. And the idea with police is to control us and expect more harsh policing as a recession starts to hit. Now, it may not be a recession on paper. Guys like Warren Mosler, whom I happen to have a great affection for, but they will say, hey, the economy's doing fine. I'm looking here. It says the economy's doing good. Okay. And he's looking at the numbers. Guys like Dean Baker, hey, the economy's doing good. What are you talking about? We got record this and that and the other. And it's true on paper because of that interest income channel. But for regular Jane and Joe six-pack who have to pay 30% interest on their credit card so that they can pay for their kids' medical care, I mean, that is huge. I mean, think about 30% on top of the money you spent. Like if I was going to spend $10, I got to spend what, $13 for every 10?
Right.
It's not hard to figure out why this is happening. And what is hard, though, is to figure out how to fix it, because ultimately they think they're fixing it. They are fixing it, but you just keep thinking they're for you, but they're not. They don't give a flying F for you, Jordan. They don't care about any of our friends in the audience here. They definitely don't care about me and my family. Okay. We got student debt. Think about this. $122,000 of student debt. I have so many degrees, and not in basket weaving or gender studies. We're talking about, honest to God, Master of Science and Technology Management, Master of Business Administration, on and on and on.
And where the fuck did it get you? Status Coup.
Not a fucking thing. Yeah, here I am on Status Coup talking about the rigged system, right? And that's the point. That's exactly the fucking point. It's a ruse. They got you. It's all about trapping you. You know what an MBA does? Let me tell you what an MBA does. An MBA teaches you how to be a good capitalist. Okay. So I learned all the way capital works through that, but I didn't understand the system. the system was still obscured to me because they want you to believe it's a good system. They want you to believe that you're doing a good thing by maximizing shareholder value, by maximizing profit. But in reality, you're becoming an accidental part, a cog of the system that predates on the people. And so I'm just telling you this because I don't like, with all the training and education I have, there is no path forward. There is no upward mobility. The wage suppression alone forces guys like me to stay as contractors instead of full-time employees, where we could get health benefits and all kinds of other things taken care of. We're stuck working in gig economies because some shithead thinks we just give them some money, it'll solve the problem. But the reality is that what we need is structural change. We need a counterbalance against the capitalist system, and we have none. And so with that knowledge, you have to do something different. And that's hard, but it's real. And I'm here to tell you, I'm here for it, because I realized I did everything, Jordan. I mean, how many people, this is rhetorical. This is not like a show off thing at all. It's a depressing thing, actually. But how many people have 2 master's degrees, much less professional master's degrees in the MBA land, et cetera? There's a million MBAs out there. And what do? They reinforce capital. Somehow or another, I broke free from that through the MMT lens. By learning how the system worked, it allowed me to break free from some of that. But every day, the sparks are going off as I learn some new way I'm being fucked, and trying to disseminate that in a responsible fashion without going off into the, speculative cray-cray clickbait shit, staying firmly on point to actionable. It's a hard place. It's horrible. It's almost worse to know, because you're bumping into people that don't want to hear it because they're afraid. They're afraid, and they just got things to do, and they got to keep on moving, because what you're talking about sounds way too much like the dude on the corner with the John 3:16 sign. And so this creates a whole problem. And we've got to educate people. We've got to get folks to recognize what's happening, so that we can fight back against the Norfolk Southern, so that we can fight back against a government that purposely allows East Palestine Palestine to stay in the way it is, that allows Flint to go on when it could have fixed it instantly, Jordan. Fixed it instantly. No, nothing needed. Fucking spend the money and do it, right? But they won't do it. Why won't they do it? Because they've got to maintain the ruse that the government is broke and only industry can save us. This is the only way they could do it. So they maintain that ruse and a joint handshake between government and industry to maintain this. And we've got to break free from that. We've got to recognize that the nation creates currency out of thin fucking air, that the taxes are deleted. They're not reused. And we need to own that so that we can fight back. If we don't do that, we're just bored, assimilated, walking and bumping into walls. Got to change that, or we will never break free, ever.
There's a lot I could say to that. I'll just say, and it might not be a popular sentiment, because people might say, oh, this gets too close to censorship, this and that. I'm beginning to think the root of why I was attracted to TYT in the first place, a long time ago, when they were far different, was I really believed that underneath it all, for you think nothing will change until we thrust forward modern monetary theory. For me, it was getting money out of politics. They're not mutually exclusive, similar. I think we have to get money out of politics. I'm beginning to think we need to have a real discussion about reforming the media, bringing back the fairness doctrine and then some, prohibiting corporations of a certain size to own media, because in other countries, the media, what it was supposed to be 20, 30 years ago, was a public service to inform the citizenry that was supposed to be separate from government or corporations and just facts. I think it went a little too far. I don't think it's bad if, people give their opinion, this and that, as long as you have the facts. But I think a lot of what we talk about all the time at the root is money in politics, and basically a information system that's been purchased, which is one. Do I still have the sound effect? Hold on.
always a psyop, fucking psyop. It's always a psyop, fucking psyop.
I mean, we don't have time now, but I'm beginning to think, hey, add that to the list, because one of the things that I had a problem with the Bernie movement was there wasn't really talk of protesting corporate media. There wasn't really, I mean, there was one protest I remember, like outside of a CNN office in LA in 2016. Other than that, I mean, I'm not talking about sending shit in the mail to CNN. That's not what we're talking about. A Trump person did that. But a lot of this is perpetuated. The bullshit and the gaslighting about the economy. The fact that literally we're burning. I don't want to hear, oh, it's summer, it's hot. No. Last week, 4 of the hottest days on record since record keeping began. Right now, 90, I think it's 90 cities are under a heat wave in America right now, or heat advisory. It's only going to get worse. Why does this keep happening? Because we don't actually have an information infrastructure in this country. We just have purchase, bought tribalism. That's why, good segue, a potential strike of over 300,000 workers looming is kind of a headline and not a major story, because they don't want you to know, because they don't want more people to get any ideas. Segue. Colin, let's show, this is the head of the Teamsters on CNBC from earlier about where things stand with 2 weeks to go before a potential strike among UPS workers.
Sounds like a signing bonus is something that might be in the works in terms of what you want for your workers.
No, I think it's more than signing bonus. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have part-timers working at poverty wages. We've got, and they're the unsung heroes. Everybody loves a UPS driver in their neighborhood, but those packages don't get on those trucks without the hard work of the part-timers, who some are living poverty wages, some are living in subsidized housing, working 2 and 3 jobs. It's a tough job, and we need to be rewarded for it. And our members are standing up and they're ready to fight. 100,000 part-timers at UPS make less than $20 per hour. UPS is on this propaganda campaign where they're saying they're making over $20 per hour. That's not true.
Yeah, I mean, UPS would say and has said that part-time workers are averaging $20 an hour after 30 days, that they get health care coverage that they don't have to pay premiums for. They get access to a pension. You're saying that's not the case?
No, they do. They do get health insurance, but they have to wait 9 months. The turnover ratio, because the work is so demanding, is astronomical. So a lot of those part-timers that go to work at UPS, they don't last. They don't trigger benefits for sometimes 9 months. It is true they do have great health care because we negotiate it. UPS doesn't give that out of the kindness of their heart. We've fought decades upon decades to make sure that our members have the best benefits in the industry. So UPS is not giving that out of the kindness of their heart.
Yeah. You know, I want to say something before you jump in here. The thing that bothers me, not just about what this guy is saying, but the focus of much of the union struggle right now, is that it's corporate unions. We're not talking about class struggle unions. We're talking about our members, all members, right? All members have all these great things. Our members, and that's great. But without a enforceable card check type deal, without having literally mandating unions and having unions work across each other, not just in their little bucket, but working together to create the kind of power that labor needs in this country, we don't have a prayer in this, man. And I see this not to denigrate anybody's efforts. It's just simply a fact that without a broad-based labor movement, we're not going to be able to make the kind of impact. Although they'll get great toilet breaks. They might get themselves access to maybe $300 extra in tuition assistance or something like that. But they're not actually fundamentally changing labor. They're not making it better for everyone. And that's part of the problem. The corporate union versus the class struggle union, 2 different mindsets. Joe Burns, great author, talks about class struggle. It's not to shit on this. It's just to make the point. These are the kinds of moments that we need to really, really think about. Broad-based strikes, broad-based labor. How does labor get together, unite? And that goes back to my little thing about the difference between France and Europe and their feudal history and knowing what it means to revolt versus in the US, where we're pissed, but we've got way too much exceptionalism baked into our brains, way too much. We're the great nation. We're the perfect place. And that's going to block a lot of the benefit that unions could really give us. That's my take. I'm sorry. I just wanted to throw
Well,
that
I
in.
also think besides the historic, fight against feudalism baked into the European DNA, there's something baked into the current DNA, which is healthcare and basic benefits that allow them to strike. Not that they wouldn't have any worry at all about being fired, but in Europe, you have tighter protections. It's harder to just fire someone for going out and protesting. If that happened, you do have strong labor unions that have not been decimated to the degree of America. And you also have healthcare. So perfect, anecdotal, but for me, I stayed at MSNBC probably almost a year longer than I wanted to because I needed the health insurance at the time. How many of you are in that, right? How many of you wouldn't, want to strike or want to join a labor union, but you're petrified of losing your job or whatever the case may be. So that's the fear that's built, that's pushed as part of this capitalist system. They have capitalist systems too, but with stronger labor protections. I agree with you. I would say with Teamsters and all these others, it really is a divide between corporate heads of these unions who talk the populist, class solidarity rhetoric, but have been selling them down the river for years and collecting high salaries themselves. AFL-CIO, SEIU, Teamsters. But bottom line, if you have half of 300,000 workers out there, that would be huge and could be a real domino effect. Colin, let's show, if anyone missed it yesterday, some of the clips of our coverage of this practice. This was not a real picket because they haven't officially gone on strike yet, but it sure looks like they're ready to go on strike.
A piece of the pie. We are tired of getting crumbs. We have families just like them. I put pepperoni and extra cheese. We want it. Let's get it all. We want it. Let's get it all. We have part-timers that they won't tell y'all. The drivers make a decent wage. It's not even good enough. Because they're out there in the heat, the winter. They need more money. And they tell y'all, oh, they make $40. But what they won't tell y'all is this. We have part-timers in there only making $16 living in shelters. How do you be a multi-billion-dollar company and you have people living in shelters and you have the nerve to look at them and say, well, I think you make enough. Right? Carol, she making $1 million. Never worked a day of her life at UPS. They put a video on where she moved the same box maybe 10 times in a minute. She would pass out if she had to do the work in the warehouse that these brothers and sisters are doing. If she had to get on a truck, she'd probably make one stop before she passed out. All right? Without the working people, which are y'all in America, this world does not move.
Yes, I'm from the Bronx. We're out here in Queens today. And I'm not the only one here from the Bronx. We got Danny Kane and Tommy Oliver from local.
You know what I mean? The working conditions as a UPS driver is hard. You know what I mean? If it's 90 degrees outside, then there's 120 in the back of the truck. I remember when I was a trainee, a guy showed me a cookie dough in a Ziploc bag, and he said, yo, I'm gonna send you a picture at lunch. And at lunch, the cookie dough started to cook. That's how hot it is in the back of a UPS truck. And all we don't want nothing heinous. We just want something fair. You know what I mean? We want equal rights, we want air conditions. We got guys that went out for heat exhaustion. We got people that passed out. A driver called me yesterday. He said his nose was bleeding twice. We just want fair conditions. The part-timers, they getting paid $16 an hour. I think McDonald's get paid more than them, and they work hard. They work hard. One part-timer is loading 4 trucks at a time. That's 200 pieces.
So I didn't fast forward through AOC to be a dick. I know Steve's got to go feed his kids soon. So even though I'm not a fan, I wasn't trying to be a dick. But I'll tell you what, between that, I mean, there was at least 150, 200 people out there for a practice picket. That's in New York. $16 an hour part-time in New York. Good luck. You're going to be living in a shelter. But I mean, these are just some tweets I found. I reached out to these people. This is from a UPS worker. Things I've gotten as a part-timer at UPS. COVID, broken, permanently chipped knuckle bone, harassed sexually and generally, repeated exposure to disgusting and dangerous materials. What I've never gotten at UPS, wages as high as $20 an hour, an annual raise. That's just one woman. I mean, there's been plenty of reporting on harassment. Another one, UPS worker, I got told to kill myself by my part-time supervisor and my junk grabbed by another supervisor in training. And then I got reassigned when I complained. I mean, I'm sure if I look hard enough, you're going to find a whole lot of other gems. Listen, we've seen over the last few years a lot of hopeful things, Starbucks workers, Amazon workers. Then we saw kind of some steps, some 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. I don't want to oversell it, but I will say most strikes don't affect the suburban mom. Most strikes don't really affect the MSNBC viewer or the neoliberal wine mom. This would affect everybody. Mail delivery. A lot of people get necessities in the mail that they need. That's why the media is already kind of framing it. Who will be harmed by a UPS strike? Not not focused on the workers that are being harassed or living in shelters, focusing on, the workers. Damn those fucking teachers who go on strike, leaving the kids without education. Same thing here. I think this could be a big deal. If UPS allows it to go to a strike, I would have to think it's not going to be solved right away. I can't predict it. Maybe they make a last-second deal, but selfishly, as a journalist, I would love to cover a massive strike like this, which I think on its face would be UPS, but could be about a lot more than just UPS, if that makes sense.
It'd be great to see other groups that are in that industry join forces together and respect the strike and not take on that work and jointly support that. That would be the kind of class struggle unionism that is important. In fact, one of the things that I think is really important that you said there is that the soccer moms, is the bourgeois of this country, they're not impacted by this stuff. So they're not going to lock arms because they don't see their class interests in striking. They don't see their class interest in supporting labor. So this is a real tragedy, quite frankly, is that we have been so divorced from the labor that we do that we don't even see each other as part of the same struggle. In fact, we would rather fight against each other. And I think that that's a real challenge. I hope that stuff like this bears fruit. I don't want to put water on a fire here. If it can spread, I'd be thrilled. I just think that the focus is way too narrow, way too my little thing. And if it starts there, great. And if it can pick up,
we got to crawl
great.
before we can walk. We have
That's
to crawl
right.
before we can walk. Yeah.
But I would like to see that kind of shared sense of struggle, that shared sense of purpose, that labor needs to rise up. And I think these little isolated things, even if they turn out sort of big, without industry supported labor literally bonding together, they're going to find a gig worker. They're going to find scabs. They're going to find people in this downtrodden economy to say, I'll happily cross the picket line and come deliver it for you. It happens all the time. I remember I used to be a technician and a cable splicer at the phone company, and they created this service called Baxi, which is Bell Atlantic Construction and something or other. And what their job was to do the inside wiring of all the jobs that we had, which would have cut out almost 3/4 of our overtime as regular core union workers. And we fought tooth and nail. Baxi ended up getting rolled into the company. But at that point in time, phone service was a dying bird. I mean, how many people actually have a regular telephone anymore? Most people don't even have it anymore. Most people have it through their computer on their phone. So watching as groups get absolved or absorbed, I should say, and spit out, it's a very real thing, man. And without having some form of way to build that kind of strength across industries, I think it's going to be a tough sled, but I'm hopeful that this is a spark and kindling and creates a fire.
Well, fuck you, Debbie Downer, for poo-pooing any sense of hope I've exhibited today. You know what? Listen, a lot of what you're saying is true, but listen, we need some small/medium size, at least a fight. And I think this would be a big deal. As of now, there's no real early 20th century law that Biden and the Dems could step in to crush their strike. Maybe they'll make one up. I don't know. So we'll see. But listen, over 300,000 workers, if 40% of them physically go on strike, everybody would feel it. I don't even think the media could ignore it. And I was saying that even the suburban mom will be inconvenienced because a lot of them get their mail from UPS. So I'm here for it. I hope it happens. We'll cover it more. Let me go through some super chats. Hang out if you can. If you have to go, that's fine. Tony D, $5. I'm in Chicago where we have record heat and air pollution. Why the hell isn't the media covering this? They just don't care, do they? Because their studio is air conditioned. They get most of the high rollers get car service to and from work, so they don't really have to go outside. And what do they give a shit? If it gets too hot, they'll find a way out. And most companies are only focused on the short-term quarterly profit, not the long-term climate apocalypse. So that's why. But thank you, Tony. Scott, $5. Fun fact, Cornel West was in the Matrix trilogy. Was he? We'll have to check into that. I like that. Humorous, $20. Thanks, Humorous. No, Tony D, they don't care about your drinking water. Your owners don't care if you have a home or food for your family. As long as you show up in the fields tomorrow, then you won't get whipped. Sad but truth. Can't really argue. Thanks, Humorous. Peace, Walker, $20. I agree with everything Steve said. What makes me lose hope is most people are not doing what is necessary for change. And what is happening with climate change, especially that retweet from Josh Ellis, scares me. Watch The Matrix. I'm going to definitely watch it by the end of summer. Das Boot Fleisch, €5.99. One of my favorite class struggle movie is John Carpenter's They Live. Okay. I'll have to put that on there too. Colin, I hope you're writing these things down. Humorous, $20. Thank you for everyone for trying to support Status Coup. I know you're all just as broke as I am. Unfortunately, I just can't be as free with my money as I used to be. I try, but that's all I can do anymore. So thank you. Hey, $20, $10, and anything really helps. So thank you, Humorous. Another $10. I will say it again. Jordan has most of the truth going on in this country. Steve has the keys that can unlock the bars and chains that bind you and set you free. Wow, we gotta pay you for the marketing. Tony, $2. Our votes are meaningless due to the EC.
Electoral College.
Yes. Fly Chompa Fly, $2. Like Bernie, I want labor reps on the corporate boards. Yes, that I completely agree with. Humorous, $5. All things are impossible until a human tries. Do you understand that statement, folks? Everything is impossible until we try. Very true. Jason R, $20. Love it when you two get together. I've been a gig worker in the live entertainment industry, and we are all gig workers now. You're damn right. And AI is going to make it a lot worse. A lot worse. Already is. Caitlin, $2. Thanks, Caitlin. Chris Garrett, $5. Grumbine, damn glad to see you back on Status Coup. Don't be a stranger. He shall not. He'll be back here. Steve, plug where people can find you. Everybody subscribe to Real Progressives, Real Progress in Action on YouTube. Other than Status Coup and a few others, I would say they do not really get into the clickbait. You know, I don't think I've seen anything about Anna Kasparian from you. God forbid, 4 days in a row, record temperatures, we're all going to burn to death. But Anna tweeted something offensive.
Couldn't possibly be interested in Anna. So catch me on my podcast, Macro and Cheese. Folks, I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Catch me on my podcast, Macro and Cheese. You can catch it it's released on Saturday mornings on all podcast platforms. It's an audio podcast. It's called Macro and Cheese. Catch it on Spotify. It's anything. Amazon. I hate to say Amazon, but Amazon even. And then, of course, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I am I have a show called The Rogue Scholar, and that's at Real Progress in Action YouTube channel. Folks, YouTube is doing a number on us. We get like 2 or 3 climbs with 2 or 3 subscribers, and they put the blockers on us, and we've been just sitting there. So please, if you like anything that I had to say tonight, I say a lot more, please do subscribe. And Jordan, thank you so much for the Vine.
Fuck that. I'm not asking, please. There's still 200 people watching. Every single one of you, if you're not subscribed, go subscribe right now. Real Progress in Action. The man is laboring on top of children, work, all these things to inform you. So go subscribe. Real progress in action. It'll take you maybe 7 seconds. Real progress in action. Go subscribe. Let's give them 50 to 100 new subscribers if you haven't subscribed yet. Real progress in action. And if you can't watch live on noon, Monday, Wednesday, watch after the fact while you're walking your dog, whatever. Be informed. It might not be the sexy, clicky topic, but it's the one you need. And he's a good guy too. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve.
Y'all take care now.
All right. Bye-bye, Steve. We'll be back at it tomorrow. Tomorrow, if everything works out, I'm going to be covering something tomorrow night in New York City. A low-income complex has lead in their soil. Arsenic has been found in soil and water. So I'm going to go out there. I'm not sure I'll be live yet. It depends how many interviews I could get. Lewis will be on tomorrow as well. And we're working on putting together our next on-the-ground trip. But please, folks, if you're not yet a Status Coup member, please sign. Hey, we just got a new member. Welcome. MMT Chaparito just became a Status Coup YouTube member. You could sign up as a YouTube member or through our website. If you ask me which one, sign up to our website. That's statuscoup.com/join. We need more members. We had a big surge in May. June, it slowed down. So far, July, not many. But we need to keep growing our membership. Statuscoup.com/join. $5 a month. Statuscoup.com/join. You could sign up at $5 a month or $10 a month. We have some other plans too. This is how we fund the on-the-ground and investigative reporting. Lewis is working on another investigative story that I think we're going to publish tomorrow on East Palestine. So if you could help us keep it going and grow, that would be really appreciated. That's statuscoup.com, statuscoup.com/join, statuscoup.com/join. Become a member for as low as a cup of coffee, a expensive Starbucks cup of coffee a day. That's $5 a month. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.